Hi guys, and welcome to a very special episode about risk management applied to crewing situations on boats. About a month ago, Ryan and I decided to embark on a journey back to Curacao where Seal is waiting for us on board a motor yacht. Now for those of you who follow our channel, you will know that we eventually decided to abandon ship. We made a couple of videos about the situation without ever naming the reason why we decided to step off the boat. Now, if you haven't seen those videos, you can go back in time, I'll put the link below or above my head. Things will make a lot more sense. We always thought that there were lots of really good opportunities in the series of events that led us here, back here in Sweden, waiting for a plane to Curacao. But instead of simply tell the story of what happened, which wouldn't have brought much and would have massively triggered the community of armchair sailors that crowd our comment section, we decided to take all of Ryan's skills when it comes to risk management from his days as a pilot, a risk management consultant and established nerds, and make this video about the thought process that led us to the decision. So in this video, we are going to be talking about risk management concepts from aviation applied to sailing. We're going to talk about due diligence and how to assess the risk level of a passage ahead of time. And because this topic is way bigger than our little experience of it, we brought in this video somebody who dedicated his life to skippering, crewing, delivering boats, and taking crew on board his 3 sailboats, introducing the man who Ryan has the most adorable bromance with.
Ryan Ellison!
Ryan Ellison! That's what I was gonna say. I am the host of the Blowspo Farm where Ryan and Sophie have been squatting for the last 2 weeks. I keep this house for all people that have gone on trips that have had to come back for whatever reason. So next time you have to abandon ship, you're welcome to come to stay on the farm out in the middle of Sweden. I'm the CEO of the Sailors Refugee Camp for everyone whose dreams have been squashed or squandered. No, listen, I'm actually the founder of 59 North and the skipper of Eastbjorn and Ice Bear. I was offshore when you guys were going through this and was counseling Ryan via the Iridium Go. So I'm very honored that you thought to ask my opinion, and I think it's cool to be here because I told you guys you're not the first to have experienced this. I've been through at least 3 of these myself as a crew member, so.
Today we're gonna use our situation and Andy's many situations as example to talk about risk management.
So risk management is a big, long, complex topic. We could talk about it for days, and in fact, Andy and I have been trying to put together a risk management seamanship course that we can offer to all of you. It's in the works. But in the meantime, 59 North has launched the quarterdeck, which its sole focus is seamanship and topics on risk. So
yeah, so we call it deep dives on the art of seamanship. Go to quarterdeck.59-north.com. It's a membership platform, but like Ryan said, the sole focus is seamanship, and seamanship is the nautical way of saying risk management, basically.
This video is not sponsored by 59 North Sailing. We just happen to like Andy.
For the purpose of this video, we're just going to do a quick overview on risk and risk management. So the first topic, or the first kind of key word here, is threats. And there's threats all around us. The easiest way to think of a threat is like a wire running through your living room that you could potentially trip over. That's a threat. And when we're out in everyday life, there's threats, and especially when we're out sailing, there are threats. And crossing an ocean, there's even bigger threats. So that's the first piece. Now, some of these threats we know and we're aware of, and some of these threats we don't know and we will never know about. They may come up on us and sneak up on us as we go. But the more experience you get, the more aware you are of the threats that might be around you. So that's the first piece, is the threats and identifying them. The second piece is the actual risk element. So with risk, there's 2 parts. There's, if a threat happens, what is the likelihood or the risk that that threat will happen? What is the likelihood that I will trip over the cable in my living room? And then the second piece of that is the severity of it. So if I do trip over that cable, what's gonna happen? Might I just trip and drop my coffee or break my nice coffee mug? Or am I gonna like smash into the floor and break my neck and become paralyzed? They're 2 drastically different things. So it's the likelihood of that threat happening and then the severity of it.
So Ryan, I like to emphasize that. I like to think about in terms of ocean sailing, because that's my thing, is the low likelihood, high consequence events are the ones that you have to handle first. So that's, I just read an article on the quarterdeck today about reefing systems. So you have in-mast roller furling. Well, that's very low likelihood that it's going to cause a problem, especially if it's well maintained. But if it does cause a problem, let's say it gets jammed halfway in, halfway out, that's going to be a high consequence event if you're out in the Atlantic, because now you can't get the mainsail down. You might have to send somebody up the mast, and you know, those sorts of things I try to eliminate altogether, because you can't ever mitigate that away completely unless you have a slab reefing system like we have on Ice Bear and Eastbjorn.
And so, Andy, you've hit on the last point of risk management, which is putting in places to mitigate risks. And when we do that, we can call those, for our storytelling here, we're calling those slices of cheese that we're going to put into place. And by putting in barriers, you're hoping to eliminate or mitigate risk, but there's never a foolproof system. So even with your slab reefing system, there are problems.
Well, that's got its own set of risks.
Exactly.
I would argue lower consequences.
But there's still risks. So we're going to call those holes in little slices of cheese. And what happens eventually is that if those barriers that we put in or don't put in, if we get a line that goes right through all those holes in the cheese, that's when accidents or incidents can happen. And that's called the Swiss cheese model from James Reason, which is a foundation of risk management. And so the storytelling that we're going to talk about today and some of your situations is all about, we felt there was too many holes in the system and things were potentially lining up to create a problem. And for us as sailors, we're just trying to mitigate that and eliminate it, essentially.
Yeah, and knowing what you don't know is like the first step to this. Exactly. Understanding that there are things that you don't know, and that you don't know what you don't know. Those are the most dangerous aspects. The things that you don't know, you don't know.
It's not being able to identify the threats. Yeah. So aviation in general uses a whole bunch of acronyms, and it's no different in the risk management world. And one of these acronyms is PAVE, and PAVE is a model in which we can identify different threats and risks while we're looking at a flight beforehand.
And it applies really well to this particular circumstance about evaluating whether you should go on a trip or if you should take crew. So that's why we've chosen this acronym for this scenario.
Exactly. So it stands for pilot, aircraft, environment, and external pressures. So we can apply that here, and the pilot is the crew, the aircraft is the ship or the boat, and then, well, the environment and external pressures are the same. So we're going to use that throughout this video, and I think it's a good backbone for what we're going to talk about today.
Way to pave the way for us, Ryan.
Alright, so in the first part of this video, we are going to talk about due diligence. And due diligence represents pretty much everything that you can do to get information about the boat and the crew before you actually get to the boat and you see the boat. So,
with due diligence, one of the big things that is really easy to accomplish at first is just knowing the roles of the people who are going to be involved and who those people are before you even get there. I think we had a really good conversation about this the other night on how to manage the risk of that, because there's all kinds of different people that could be involved with sailing a boat.
So we came up with like two matrices for this, looking at the people and how qualified they are. So in your guys' case, in your example, you had a recreational owner and you guys are yourselves recreational sailors, although with your professional aviation background, I would maybe elevate you slightly above that. So you're recreational and recreational. So now you're sort of at the bottom of that matrix. I would class that as higher risk than, in my case, I'm professional and we have recreational crew that pay to sail with us. So that's, you know, kind of a different elevation.
Bring it up one level.
When I'm doing a delivery, it's professional. And then you might have a handful of recreational extra bodies, but they're just there to get me more sleep. But I'm professional, I'm gonna have a professional mate, and then we usually have one or two recreational sailors. So that's like the high end of that matrix, where we've got two professionals that really know what we're doing and can minimize some of the risks because we're trained and qualified to do that.
And I think it's important just to point out that just because you're professional at the top of that list doesn't mean that that's a fail-safe, nothing's gonna happen.
Right.
But what it does is it just maybe lowers the value, the risk value of that particular category that you're looking at.
Whereas, I mean, it's the reason we have a business model, because people are willing not only to come with us, but to pay a lot of money to come with us, because they're removing a lot of uncertainties by going with a standardized experience.
We really like Andy.
So the other side of this, Ryan, is, so you have the qualification matrix, now you have the relationship matrix.
Right.
So, and again, in your guys' case, you had an owner who you didn't know and didn't have any connection to other than he blindly reached out to you. He thought he knew you guys because of YouTube, but that was sort of a one-way street. So he has an impression of you, but he's never met you, nor does he have any friends that personally can vouch for you. So then halfway up the ladder you have, you know, if I send you to sail with somebody, I am the link between you two people. So at least there's some sort of intermediary that can vouch for each other. I can say, yep, I know the captain, he's good. I can tell him, I know Ryan and Sophie, they're good. The third level of that is you know these people directly, and you've interacted with them socially. That's even better yet, because you know how they are personality-wise. The best case of all is you know them personally and you have sailed with them, because you know what they're gonna be like on the boat. You should start a dating service.
Just to connect people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is in sailing, but this goes in all industries. So in aviation, for instance, the personality piece of it is so important that there are actually lists that pilots can go on and say, I can't fly with Andy. I think he's a good guy, but I just cannot stand him in the cockpit. And that's a bad situation to be in. So they have lists that just say, well, those two don't fly together.
And they don't ask questions. It's just
that's what it is. And end of discussion. And that's just how personalities are, but it's an important piece.
So the way that we did due diligence on this particular passage was to use our own webpage in which we describe exactly what we expect from crew when they come sail with us on polar seal, as a basis for our discussion with the captain and first mate of the motor yacht.
So even in our case, we vet the crew that come in to us even though they're paying to be there. And we do this in a way, not directly, but we have an application process on the website. We deliberately make it long and ask difficult questions, because if people can't take the time to answer those questions, or if they realize, okay, I'm not cut out for this, it seems to be self-selecting. And we, over 5 years and several hundred crew, I can count on one hand the amount of, we call them DNABs, do not allow back. There's a secret list of them, but it's literally only a handful of people long. And even then, I'd probably, you know, it's always easier in hindsight.
So that's good for the business now. What about when you were doing deliveries? Did you have a process for how you met the owners or other people you might be sailing with and worked through that?
No. I mean, I never thought about this stuff. This is like back in the you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot I didn't know that I didn't know 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, that's when luck plays a much bigger part in this. But some of the stories I'll tell in a minute, I was at least smart enough to realize I was in a bad situation.
Yeah.
But no, I had no systems.
Okay.
There's no shame in not knowing what you don't know. You have to start somewhere.
So after doing our due diligence, we came to the conclusion that Ryan and I and the owner of the motor yacht had the same approach to safety. We had covered everything from health issues to eating issues and the fact that I don't eat cheese. Our understanding was that the boat was in good shape and that the survey had come out good. The fuel considerations were taken care of, the range was not an issue, and the fuel bladders that were going to be the extra fuel carried for the crossing would be ordered before we would arrive on the boat.
So I think it's worth mentioning though that we were aware that this boat was a new boat to them, and it's also their first, they had a motorboat experience, but it was their first owned motorboat. And that wasn't lost on Sophie and I, and we knew that that was something that was a risk factor. So it was something we had discussed and talked about, but also felt that these owners were gonna motor the boat about 1,200 miles before we met up with them and would get to know their boat a bit during that process. So
for us, a boat that is new to the owner is not immediately a dismissive factor, because every year lots of boats are being delivered right and left all across the globe that are new to their owners or new to the crew or the skippers. So we didn't feel that it was a huge deal. We just knew that we needed to keep our eyes open for potential problems and we knew that we were going to be working on the boat quite a lot. But there is only so much that you can know or learn before actually seeing the boat. So now we're going to talk about what happens that moment you arrive and you found out what things really are. I mean, in a good way or bad way. It doesn't need to be good or bad.
My initial gut feeling was like probably hidden by the fact that I thought this was super cool situation. Like this big motorboat comes up and you're like, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna cross an ocean. I'm gonna be sitting in this like warm cockpit. Like
you texted me a photo of a crystal chandelier hanging in the main salon and said, how long do you think that's gonna last?
At least my initial impressions, and this can happen to anybody, that excitement takes over from, like puts the blinders on, as I described, and allows you not to see certain things. So my initial reaction was like, this is really cool, and it takes a few days before that wears off, and then certain things start bubbling up and you start saying, well, this isn't quite right, or this isn't quite right, or I have a lot of concerns about this. And that's me as a recreational sailor. So somebody, Andy, like you, we were having a discussion about your very, very first delivery.
Yeah.
And how that came in, how your impressions was. And this story's so good, I think that you should
I'll try to keep it short.
The short
so
part of it.
It involved a 32-foot Pearson going from Bermuda to Halifax.
Sorry to cut you off though. This is, for context, this is Andy's very first professional delivery trip. The first
How
time
were
he's
you?
getting paid.
I was 23 or 24.
Oh, you were a baby.
Going to Bermuda to Halifax on a Pearson 32. I didn't do nearly the due diligence I should have, although the connection between me and the owner was a personal connection, so there was that, so that was good. I get out to the boat. This guy named Coco was caretaking the boat. He picked me up from the airport, drives me out to the boat, which was on a mooring in this little backwoods lagoon. And in order for us to get from land to the boat, we had this old, like, sinking, you know, those paddle boats that you, like,
pedals like this. Yeah.
So I chuck my duffel bag on there, me and Coco get on the paddle boat, go out to the boat, and, like, okay, talk about instincts and excitement. I'm just like, what am I getting myself into? But I'm gonna see how this goes. So Coco's like, well, the prop was put on wrong, so you have to go in reverse to go forward, and the throttle doesn't work, so I'll be down below with my hand on the engine on the throttle. You just, you know, shout down the orders from the helm. So we're puttering across to St. George's, to the main harbor. There's so much wind, the boat was only making like a knot and a half. So we get blown sideways, and I realize we don't have an anchor. So we're not gonna make it across this windy channel, and we're gonna get blown onto the reef. So there's an anchored motorboat in the corner. We pull up next to it, tie off, and try to figure out what to do. Coco was a former pilot boat captain, the guys that take the pilots out to big ships. He called up his pilot boat buddies. They came out with a pilot boat, towed us out this one channel and in this other channel, and now we get over to St. George's. And the story goes on, but suffice it to say, I did not take this boat from Bermuda to Halifax, and I'm very glad that I didn't. But, you know, right away, I knew, like, this is not what I signed up for, and it took some time for me to then confirm that.
Yeah, and I think that was like a point that you and I discussed, was like, sometimes you get a feeling in your stomach right away, and that right away might be 1 day or 2 days or whatever, and then you get that feeling, and it might take some time before you realize, like, why is that feeling there?
You have to be able to separate nerves. So the other side of your excitement is like being nervous.
Right.
Being overly nervous because this is new to you. So how do you separate that out? And I talk about nerves being a good thing. I used to play golf competitively. If I wasn't nervous on the first tee, I wasn't focused.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that element to it, but it's learning to calibrate your gut instinct as well, and that takes time. But initially, you can create objective systems in order to do that. And even if everything checks out, you might still have a bad feeling, and that feeling is enough not to go. Because even if everything's fine, and you have this feeling that causes you not to enjoy it, then it's worth not going. There's a fine line between facing your fears and growing as a person and a sailor.
And just not enjoying it.
And just not enjoying it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And that's why, you know, back to us, not to make a plug for our business, but that's why a lot of people come with us, because they want to face their fears in an environment they know they're going to be safe.
But again, we like Andy. Alright, so now we're going to go into each letter of the acronym PAVE and give examples of all of our situations combined of what risk factors in each of these areas can look like. Starting with...
Pilot.
Nope. No, starting with the aircraft, which in sailing or boating in general is not aircraft, it would be a vessel.
Boat. Tugboat.
A boat.
Sailboat.